evening, dear wanderer of the night. Welcome, truly welcome, to the Whispers of Time channel. I'm so deeply grateful you found your way here tonight, to this gentle sanctuary where the chaos and noise of the modern world dissolves like morning mist, where time itself becomes fluid and negotiable, where you can step out of your present moment and into something so utterly different, so impossibly distant, that all your contemporary worries become irrelevant because they simply haven't been invented yet in the place we're going. Perhaps today has been overwhelming. Perhaps your mind has been caught in endless loops of anxiety and planning and rumination. Perhaps you're exhausted but unable to sleep, your thoughts racing when they should be settling. Perhaps you simply need to disappear for a while, to become someone else, somewhere else, someone else so completely removed from your current existence that the transformation itself becomes a kind of meditation, a kind of healing, a doorway into the deep rest your body and mind are desperately craving. Tonight, we're embarking on perhaps the most extraordinary journey we've ever taken together. We're traveling back 500 years to a civilization so sophisticated, so complex, so utterly unlike anything that came before or after it, that when Spanish conquistadors first laid eyes on it in 1519, they thought they were experiencing a collective hallucination, a shared dream, a vision sent by God or the devil, or some force beyond human comprehension. They rubbed their eyes and looked again, and it was still there, an impossible city rising from the middle of a vast lake, a metropolis of perhaps 200,000 people, at a time when London had barely 50,000, with pyramids and palaces and temples that gleamed white in the sun, with canals instead of streets, with floating gardens that seemed to defy the laws of nature, with markets so vast and well organized that Spanish soldiers, who had seen the great markets of Seville and Venice and Constantinople, declared they had never witnessed anything comparable, were stepping into the Aztec Empire at its absolute zenith, into the island city of Tenochtitlan, built in the middle of Lake Texcoco, a feat of engineering and urban planning that would be impressive even today with our modern technology, but which the Aztecs accomplished using only human labor and ingenious understanding of hydraulics and agriculture and architecture. This is not the primitive, savage world that old history books portrayed, not the bloodthirsty barbarians of European propaganda. This is a civilization of astonishing sophistication, with mandatory universal education for all children regardless of social class or gender, with street cleaners ensuring the capital was cleaner than any European city of the period, with public toilets and waste management systems that turned human waste into fertilizer for the floating gardens, with botanical gardens and zoos that housed specimens from across the empire and beyond, with a legal code so detailed and specific that virtually every aspect of life was regulated and understood, with poetry and philosophy of stunning depth and beauty, with astronomical observations of remarkable accuracy, with a calendar system more precise than the Julian calendar Europeans were using. The Aztecs bathed daily, sometimes twice daily, in steam baths called temazcalli, at a time when European nobility might bathe once or twice a year, and considered frequent bathing unhealthy and spiritually dangerous. They had a complex philosophy about the nature of time and reality and human existence. They created poetry that rivals anything produced in Renaissance Europe. They built structures that still stand today, 500 years and countless earthquakes later, engineered with a precision that modern architects still study and admire. They developed a pictographic writing system capable of recording history, laws, tribute requirements, astronomical observations, and even poetry. They created art in feathers that was so exquisite, so delicate, so skillfully crafted that Spanish conquistadors sent examples back to Europe, where they were marveled at and treasured in royal collections. But they also lived in a world governed by gods who demanded blood, where the cosmos itself was fragile and required constant maintenance through ritual, where the sun, that life-giving star that makes all existence possible, would literally die and cease to rise if humans did not provide it with the precious water of sacrifice, which is what they called blood, where beauty and brutality existed not in opposition, but in harmony, both necessary, both expressions of fundamental cosmic truths, where a man might compose exquisite poetry about the transience of flowers and the brevity of life in the morning, attend a human sacrifice at the great temple at midday, and return home to play with his children in the evening, seeing no contradiction in these activities, because all were part of the same cosmic order, all necessary, all expressions of the fundamental truth that existence requires death, that life feeds on life, that the gods gave their own blood to create humanity in the first place, and we must give ours in return to maintain the balance of the universe. This paradox, this simultaneous sophistication, and what we would consider brutality, is what makes the Aztec Empire so fascinating and so challenging for modern minds to comprehend. We want to categorize civilizations as either advanced or primitive, civilized or barbaric, but the Aztecs defy these simple categories. They were simultaneously more advanced than contemporary Europe in many ways, and also engaged in practices that horrify us. Holding both these truths simultaneously, understanding that a civilization can be remarkable and terrible, sophisticated and shocking, is part of the journey we're taking tonight. Tonight, we'll walk through a complete day in this extraordinary world. We'll wake before dawn in a modest home in one of the city's residential districts, in a family of Macehueltan commoners, the vast majority of Aztec society, the backbone of the empire, the farmers and artisans and merchants whose daily labor made everything else possible. Will experience breakfast of maize tortillas and beans and vegetables, prepared using techniques that would be familiar to modern Mexicans, because these culinary traditions stretch unbroken across 5 centuries, surviving conquest and colonization and cultural upheaval. We'll walk through streets that are swept clean every single morning by armies of workers. 1,000 men per district assigned to maintain cleanliness, making Tenochtitlan the cleanest major city in the world at that time. We'll see the Templo Mayor, the great pyramid temple that dominates the city's skyline, rising 150 feet above the lake, visible from miles away, an architectural and spiritual center where the gods are fed and the cosmos is maintained. We'll smell copal incense burning in hundreds of shrines throughout the city, that distinctive sweet sharp scent that the Aztecs associated with the divine realm, that carried prayers upward to the gods. We'll hear the sound of drums and conch shell trumpets marking the passage of hours, the rhythmic heartbeat of the city organizing time and activity, calling people to work or worship or meals. We'll visit the great marketplace of Tlatelolco, sister city to Tenochtitlan, where 60,000 people might gather on a major market day, where goods from every corner of the empire and beyond were bought and sold in an organized, regulated system that included quality control inspectors, fixed prices for staple goods, merchant courts to settle disputes, and sections devoted to specific types of merchandise so buyers could easily find what they needed, where you could purchase jade jewelry from the Maya lowlands, turquoise from the northern deserts, jaguar pelts from the tropical forests, cacao beans that served as currency and luxury beverage, vanilla and precious feathers and gold and silver worked into exquisite forms, enslaved people waiting to be purchased, vegetables grown on the floating gardens, pottery and textiles and tools, and literally thousands of different items, all organized, all regulated, all part of an economic system of remarkable sophistication. We'll see children going to school, all children, rich and poor, boys and girls, even the children of slaves, all required by law to attend educational institutions where they'll learn the songs and dances and histories and moral lessons that will shape them into proper Aztec citizens, where they'll be taught respect for elders and gods, discipline and duty, the importance of their place in the social hierarchy, the stories of how the world was created and destroyed 4 times before this current age, the prophecies about how this 5th age will eventually end in earthquakes and destruction. Unless humans maintain cosmic order through proper behavior and ritual observance, we'll witness the daily steam bath, the temazcalli, which was not a luxury, but a necessity for proper Aztec citizens. A ritual cleansing that was simultaneously physical and spiritual, removing not just the day's dirt and sweat, but also negative energies and spiritual pollution, emerging clean and renewed and ready for the evening's activities and the night's rest. We'll understand that Aztec concepts of cleanliness and purity were deeply tied to their religious beliefs, that being physically clean was part of being spiritually correct, that the body and soul were not separate, but intimately connected, that maintaining one required maintaining the other. we'll explore how the chinampas, those famous floating gardens, actually worked. How the Aztecs transformed a swampy lake into the most productive agricultural system in the ancient Americas, producing multiple crops per year from what seemed like nothing, feeding a population density that wouldn't be matched in Mexico until the 20th century. We'll understand the sophisticated knowledge of soil composition, irrigation, fertilization, and crop rotation that made this possible. The centuries of accumulated agricultural wisdom that allowed the Aztecs to thrive where others might have starved. See craftspeople at work, feather workers creating art pieces of such delicacy and beauty that they seem almost impossibly fragile. Goldsmiths using the lost wax casting technique to create jewelry of remarkable intricacy. Obsidian workers striking flakes from volcanic glass cores to create blades sharper than modern steel scalpels. Textile weavers creating cloth with patterns and colors that required years to master. Stone carvers working on monuments that will last 1,000 years. Will understand that these crafts weren't just jobs, but vocations, often passed down through families for generations, requiring lifetime dedication to master, creating works of art that were also functional objects, blurring the line between craft and art in ways that European minds of the period struggled to comprehend. We'll hear music played on instruments that sound like nothing in the modern world. Drums of different sizes creating complex polyrhythms, conch shell trumpets with their haunting, otherworldly call, clay flutes, and whistles producing melodies that seem to come from another dimension, rasps made from bone or wood creating percussion that drives dancers and connects earth to sky. We'll hear poetry being recited, not read, but memorized and performed, because poetry in Aztec culture was meant to be heard and experienced, not silently consumed on a page. Poetry that contemplated the nature of existence, the transience of life, the question of whether anything is real or if we're all just dreaming. Themes that seem remarkably modern and existential coming from a civilization we once dismissed as primitive. We'll feel the constant presence of the gods woven into every aspect of existence, making the boundary between sacred and secular almost meaningless, because everything was sacred. Every act had religious significance. Every moment was part of maintaining the cosmic order. The gods were not distant abstract concepts, but immediate presences, forces that affected daily life in tangible ways, beings who required constant attention and offerings, and proper behavior if they were to continue blessing humanity with rain and sun and fertility, and all the things that make life possible. And as evening falls over the Great Lake, and the family we've been following gathers for their final meal, as the sun sets in spectacular colors over the western mountains, and the city begins to settle into its nighttime rhythms, we'll understand that despite all the vast differences in technology and worldview and social organization, these were people fundamentally like us. They loved their children with the same fierce protectiveness we feel. They worked hard to provide for their families. They sought meaning and beauty in a universe that offered no guarantees, and that seemed frequently hostile and incomprehensible. They created community and culture and connection. They told stories and sang songs and danced and laughed and grieved. They lived fully in the brief time they were given before they too would join the ancestors in Mictlan, the underworld, or in one of the paradise realms reserved for those who died in special circumstances, warriors in battle, women in childbirth, those who drowned or were struck by lightning, the honored dead who would continue in some form beyond this life. So let your breathing slow now, deeply and completely slow. Let your body release all its tension, all its holding, all its resistance to rest. Feel yourself sinking into whatever supports you. Feel gravity pulling gently. Feel the weight of your modern concerns becoming lighter, less urgent, less real. Feel the boundaries of time softening and blurring around you. Let yourself drift backward, not just through years or decades or centuries, but through half a millennium, through the Spanish conquest that would shatter this world, through the decades and centuries when Tenochtitlan was the jewel of Mesoamerica, and the Aztec Empire seemed eternal and unchangeable, arriving in a moment when the city was at its absolute peak, when no one could imagine it would ever end, when the universe seemed stable and the gods were satisfied, and life continued in its intricate patterns that had been followed for generations, and that everyone assumed would continue forever. And before we begin this journey into the Aztec world, one small request. If this is the peace you've been seeking, if you want to return tomorrow night to another story that will carry you gently into sleep's embrace, if these journeys through time help you escape the relentless present, take just one moment now, while you're still awake enough to move your hand, to tap that subscribe button and turn on notifications. I'll be here waiting for you tomorrow evening at this same time, same voice, same gentle refuge from chaos. Most people drift away into sleep within the first few minutes of these stories, so do it now while you still can, while your eyes are still open. One simple tap, and I guarantee we'll meet again tomorrow night. And every night, you need to escape into the past. Now then, close your eyes completely. Feel yourself floating backward through time like a leaf carried on a gentle current, moving effortlessly through the centuries, through the colonial period when Mexico was New Spain, through the conquest when Cortés and his soldiers encountered something beyond their comprehension, through the months before their arrival when the Aztec world was still complete and whole, arriving in the year 1519, just months before everything would change forever, though no one knows that yet, arriving in a moment of ordinary peace on an ordinary day, when life continues in its ancient patterns, as if it will last eternally. Let's begin our journey now to Tenochtitlan, to the family we'll follow through their day, to a world so different from ours that experiencing it will free your mind from its current preoccupations and let you finally rest. The person wakes slowly in the pre-dawn darkness, consciousness returning gradually in stages, moving from the depths of sleep toward full awareness in the way that's universal across all human experience, regardless of time or place. The transition is gentle, natural, the body's own rhythm bringing wakefulness without the harsh intervention of alarms or external demands. The first sensation that penetrates awareness is the hardness of the woven reed mat beneath the body. Not uncomfortable exactly, because the person has slept on such mats every night for their entire life. The body long ago adapted to surfaces that Europeans would find impossible to rest on. The second sensation is warmth. The cotton blanket pulled close during the night, trapping body heat, creating a small pocket of comfort in the cool pre-dawn air. Cotton is one of the Aztec Empire's most important commodities, grown in the warmer lowlands and transported to the highlands as tribute, woven by women into cloth of varying qualities. From the coarse, undecorated fabric that commoners are permitted to wear to the fine decorated textiles that are reserved exclusively for nobility, and whose unauthorized use is punishable by death. Because, in Aztec society, clothing immediately identifies social status, and wearing garments above your station is not just inappropriate, but actually illegal, a disruption of social order that threatens cosmic balance. The third sensation is the presence of other breathing bodies in the small room. The wife sleeping beside the person we're following, her breathing deep and regular, completely relaxed in sleep. The three children curled together on their own mat against the opposite wall. The oldest a boy of perhaps 10, the middle child a girl of 7, the youngest a girl of 4, their small bodies nested together for warmth and security. The grandmother in the corner near the household shrine, her breathing slightly labored with age, a soft wheezing that speaks of years, and the gradual declining of the body, but steady, peaceful, the breath of someone who has made peace with mortality and no longer fights against time's inevitable passage. Outside the small house, the city is just beginning its own transition from night to day. The first faint sounds of morning activity drifting through the mud brick walls that separate interior from exterior space. Someone is walking past on the street, their footsteps soft but distinct in the quiet of pre-dawn. Water is being poured somewhere nearby, perhaps someone beginning their own morning ablutions or watering a courtyard garden. The distant call of a water bird from the lake that surrounds this island city on all sides. One of the thousands of birds that make their home on Lake Texcoco, that provide feathers and eggs and meat, that are part of the rich ecosystem that the Aztecs have learned to exploit without destroying, maintaining a balance between human needs and natural abundance. The person lies still for a long moment, fully conscious now, but not yet ready to abandon the comfort of the sleeping mat and the blanket's warmth. taking these few minutes of peace before the day's demands begin. This liminal time between sleep and full waking is precious, a space for reflection and mental preparation, for remembering dreams if there were any worth remembering, for reviewing the day's planned activities, for simply being present in one's own body and mind without the pressure of external obligations. But the body knows the ancient rhythm, understands without being told that rising now, before the sun breaks over the eastern mountains, means getting ahead of the day's building heat, means having time to accomplish important tasks before the sun climbs high and makes outdoor work uncomfortable. The person sits up slowly, carefully, trying not to disturb the wife who will wake soon enough on her own internal schedule, who will rise and begin her own morning routine of fire tending and meal preparation, and the endless work of maintaining a household in a time and place where nothing comes easily, where every necessity requires constant labor. The small room is dark, illuminated only by the faint orange glow of embers in the cooking area that's separated from the sleeping space by a low partition made of woven mats. The fire never goes completely out, kept alive overnight by banking coals under ash, ready to be revived in the morning with minimal effort. Because starting fire from scratch, using the fire drill, a stick rotated rapidly in a notch carved in another piece of wood, is time-consuming and uncertain, sometimes taking many attempts before the friction generates enough heat to ignite tinder. Better to maintain what you have than to need to recreate it from nothing. A principle that applies to fire and to many other aspects of Aztec life. The person stands and moves quietly across the small room toward the doorway that leads to the family's courtyard, stepping carefully to avoid the scattered possessions, sleeping mats rolled and stored against walls during the day, clay pots containing food or water or supplies, woven baskets holding clothing or tools, the few material possessions that constitute the family's wealth. The doorway is covered by a cotton cloth that serves as a door, providing privacy and protection from insects while allowing air circulation. Hanging from a wooden frame, simple but functional. Stepping through into the courtyard, the person emerges into the open air that's cool and fresh and clean in these hours before dawn, before the sun's heat begins to bake the earth and the air becomes still and heavy. The courtyard is small, perhaps 20 feet square, an open space enclosed by mud brick walls that mark the boundaries of the family's property, separating their private domain from the street and from neighboring properties. The walls are whitewashed with lime, gleaming pale, even in the dim pre-dawn light, part of the city-wide emphasis on cleanliness and order that makes Tenochtitlan unlike any other city in the world at this time. In one corner of the courtyard stands the household shrine, a small raised platform made from stone and mud brick, topped with a thatched roof to protect it from rain. On this platform, sit several clay figurines representing the household gods, the small deities who watch over this specific family and who must be honored daily if their protection is to continue. There's a figure of Tlaloc, the rain god whose favor is essential for agricultural success, a figure of Huitzilopochtli, the patron god of the Mexica people, who led them to this place where they would build their great city, a figure of Coatlicue, the Earth Mother who provides all sustenance, and several smaller figurines representing ancestors who have passed into the realm of the dead, but who continue to watch over their descendants, ready to intercede with the gods on behalf of the living if properly honored and remembered. The person approaches the shrine and kneels on the hard-packed earth of the courtyard floor, taking a moment for the morning prayers that begin every single day without exception. These prayers are not optional, not something done when convenient or when one feels particularly pious. They are required, essential, the foundation of proper living, the acknowledgement of debts owed to the gods who created humanity and who continue to maintain the universe through their own constant efforts and sacrifices. The Aztecs understand that the cosmos is not self-sustaining, that it requires constant work to maintain order against the forces of chaos that always threaten, that humans must do their part through prayer and ritual and proper behavior if existence itself is to continue. The words of the morning prayer are familiar, memorized in early childhood and repeated every morning for so many years that they've become automatic, rising to the lips without conscious thought. But automatic doesn't mean insincere. The familiarity breeds not contempt, but comfort, the sense of participating in something larger than oneself, of adding one's voice to countless others across the city and across the empire, all offering the same prayers at approximately the same time, creating a wave of devotion that rises to the heavens and pleases the gods and helps maintain cosmic balance. Tlaloc, bringer of rain, lord of the waters, you who dwell in the mountains where clouds are born, you who send the precious liquid that makes all things grow, accept my gratitude and continue your blessings. To Nadia, honored son, you who rise each morning and drive back the darkness, you who were born from sacrifice and who require sacrifice to continue your journey, accept my acknowledgement and continue your path across the sky. Huitzilopochtli, protector of the Mexica, you who led our ancestors to this place where we would become great, you who gave us dominion over others, accept my devotion and continue your protection. Coatlicue, Earth Mother, you who provide all food and all substance, you who are both creator and devourer, accept my respect and continue your generosity. To all the gods and to my ancestors who watch from the realm beyond, I offer my prayers and my obedience and my commitment to living in accordance with the ways handed down from ancient times. After the spoken prayers, the person performs the physical ritual. From a small clay jar kept beside the shrine, a pinch of copal incense is taken. The dried resin of the copal tree, yellow-white and aromatic, even before burning. One of the most sacred substances in Mesoamerican religious practice. An ember is brought from the cooking fire, carried carefully in a small clay dish, and the copal is placed upon this ember, where it begins immediately to melt and smoke, releasing its distinctive scent, sweet and sharp, and somehow otherworldly, a smell that the Aztecs associate with the divine realm, and that triggers automatic feelings of reverence and awe. The smoke rises in thin wisps, curling upward toward the dawn sky, visible in the dim light, carrying prayers upward to the gods who dwell in the celestial realm, creating a connection between earth and heaven, between human and divine, between the material and the spiritual. The person breathes deeply, inhaling the sacred smoke, feeling it enter the lungs and disperse throughout the body, a physical manifestation of the spiritual, a tangible link to forces beyond human comprehension. This small morning ritual, repeated in thousands of households across Tenochtitlan, is part of what maintains the empire, part of what keeps the gods satisfied and the cosmos functioning. The great public sacrifices at the main temples might be more dramatic and more visible, but these small private devotions are equally important. The foundation on which the spectacular state ceremonies rest, evidence that the entire population is properly oriented toward the gods and toward maintaining the social and cosmic order. The sky is beginning to lighten now, the stars fading one by one as dawn approaches, the eastern horizon showing the first hints of the golden glow that will precede the sun's emergence. The person moves to the corner of the courtyard, where a large clay jar, perhaps 3 feet tall, holds the family's water supply. This water was carried here yesterday from one of the neighborhood fountains that tap into the aqueduct system, bringing fresh water from springs on the mainland, an engineering marvel that allows the city to have clean drinking water despite being surrounded by the slightly brackish and alkaline waters of Lake Texcoco. The person performs the morning washing, scooping water with a smaller clay bowl and splashing it over face and hands, rinsing the mouth, symbolically washing away the vulnerabilities and spiritual pollution that accumulate during sleep when the conscious mind is absent, and the soul might wander and encounter dangerous forces. The water is cool, slightly mineral in taste, carrying faint flavors of the volcanic soil it filtered through before emerging at the springs. Characteristic of Tenochtitlan's water supply, familiar and reassuring. Cleanliness is enormously important in Aztec culture, far more so than in most other civilizations of this era. The Aztecs bathe frequently, wash their clothes regularly, sweep their homes and streets daily, maintain public toilet facilities, and view physical cleanliness as intimately connected to spiritual purity. They find the Spanish conquistadors, who will arrive in a few months, to be almost unbelievably filthy, reeking of unwashed bodies and clothing. And they struggle to understand how people can live in such conditions without dying of shame or sickness. But the Spanish, of course, find Aztec bathing practices excessive and suspicious, interpreting frequent washing as evidence of moral weakness or religious error, certain that too much bathing weakens the body and opens it to disease, creating a cultural misunderstanding that will persist throughout the colonial period. After washing, the person returns inside to the sleeping area to dress for the day. For a man of the commoner class, appropriate clothing is strictly defined, and deviation from these rules is not just a fashion error, but a crime. The basic garment is the maxtlatl, a loincloth made from a long strip of woven maguey fiber cloth, wrapped around the waist, with one end passing between the legs, and both ends hanging down front and back. The cloth is undyed, the natural pale color of processed maguey fiber, and completely undecorated because decoration is reserved for higher social classes. Over the maxtlatl goes the temazcalli, a square cloak that's tied at the shoulder, also made from maguey fiber, also undyed and undecorated. The temazcalli can be worn in various ways, depending on weather and activity, tied high on the shoulder for ease of movement during work, draped lower for warmth in cool weather, folded and carried when heat makes any covering uncomfortable. It's a simple garment, but remarkably versatile, serving as coat, blanket, bag, and even makeshift shelter when necessary. If the person were noble, the clothing would be dramatically different. Cotton instead of maguey fiber, dyed in vibrant colors, decorated with intricate patterns, the temazcalli extending to the ankles instead of the knees, perhaps adorned with feathers or gold ornaments. But such garments are absolutely forbidden to commoners, and wearing them without authorization is punishable by death, because the social hierarchy must be visible and unambiguous, because maintaining clear distinctions between classes is essential to cosmic order, because allowing individuals to present themselves as higher status than they truly are would create confusion and chaos that would ripple outward and threaten the entire structure of reality. The clothing is clean, washed recently by the wife according to her regular schedule of household maintenance. She washes clothing using soap made from the roots of the conquistador tree, scrubbing the fabric against smooth stones worn silky by years of use, rinsing in clean water, wringing out as much moisture as possible, then hanging to dry in the sun and wind. Clean clothing is a sign of respect for oneself, for one's family, for one's social position, for the gods who expect humans to present themselves properly. Even the poorest commoner maintains clean clothing if at all possible, because appearing disheveled and dirty is shameful and suggests moral failing as much as material poverty. The wife is awake now, rising from her sleeping mat with smooth, practiced movements. A woman perhaps in her late 20s or early 30s, still young, but showing the effects of hard work and multiple childbirths. She moves immediately toward the cooking area, her mind already organizing the tasks ahead. Rekindle the fire, grind maize for tortillas, prepare beans and vegetables, feed the children, manage a dozen other household responsibilities that will fill her day from dawn until well after dark. Her work is never finished, never complete, an endless cycle of tasks that must be done every single day without exception. The invisible labor that makes everything else possible, that keeps the family fed and clothed and sheltered, that transforms raw materials into the necessities of life. She kneels beside the fire pit and begins the process of coaxing flames from embers. Small sticks are added first, arranged in a careful pattern that allows air circulation, the person's hands moving with the unconscious skill of someone who has performed this exact task thousands of times. She leans close and blows gently, but steadily, directing air onto the hottest coals, feeding them oxygen, encouraging them to release their stored heat and ignite the new fuel. Smoke rises first, thin gray wisps that make her eyes water slightly, and she continues blowing, patient, knowing that persistence will be rewarded. And then, suddenly, a small flame appears, tentative at first, a bright orange flicker in the dimness, growing stronger as it catches on the dry wood, spreading to adjacent sticks, beginning to crackle and produce real heat. The wife adds more fuel, slightly larger pieces now that the fire is reliably burning, building it gradually to the level needed for cooking, not rushing, because rushing wastes fuel and might smother the flames, working with the patient efficiency of someone who understands their craft completely. The person watches for a moment, appreciating the skill displayed even in this simple task, feeling gratitude for a wife who is competent and hardworking, and who maintains the household with minimal supervision or assistance, allowing the person to focus on the external work of farming without worrying about domestic matters. Aztec marriages are practical arrangements, usually negotiated between families when the partners are quite young. But that doesn't mean they're loveless. Affection can grow over years of shared work and shared life. Respect can develop from witnessing competence and dedication. Love can emerge from the simple fact of facing life's challenges together rather than alone. Not every marriage achieves this, of course. Some remain cold and functional. Some become actively hostile. But many do achieve a quiet, comfortable companionship that might not be dramatic or romantic, but that provides real comfort and support through all the difficulties that life presents. The children are beginning to stir now, responding to the sounds and smells of morning, to the increasing light filtering into the room, to some internal clock that tells them it's time to wake. The oldest, the 10-year-old boy, sits up first, rubbing his eyes with small fists, looking around with that momentary confusion children often show upon waking, trying to orient himself, to remember where he is, and what day it is, and what obligations await. His name is something like Chimali, shield, a common name for boys, hoping they'll grow up to be protectors and warriors, if not literally, then at least metaphorically, defenders of family and community. The two younger children, the girls, remain asleep a bit longer, their faces peaceful in the growing firelight, still caught in whatever dreams occupy the minds of children. They'll wake soon enough, but for now, they're allowed these last few moments of rest. Childhood in Aztec society is not the extended protected period that modern societies try to provide. Children are expected to begin contributing to household labor as soon as they're physically capable, usually around age 5 or 6, taking on age-appropriate tasks that become progressively more demanding as they grow. But they're still children, still allowed some space for play and rest, still recognized as beings in process rather than fully formed adults. The grandmother is awake now too, though she remains lying on her mat, conserving energy, perhaps experiencing the stiffness and pain that often accompany aging bodies. She's perhaps 60 or even older, which is remarkable in a time and place where life expectancy is perhaps 40 years if you survive childhood diseases and injuries. Her survival to this age is evidence of good fortune, good genes, and the support of a family that values and cares for elderly members rather than abandoning them when they can no longer contribute labor. In Aztec society, elders are respected for their accumulated wisdom and experience, consulted about important decisions, honored in daily interactions, cared for when they can no longer care for themselves. To mistreat or neglect elderly parents or grandparents is not just wrong, but actually criminal, punishable by law. Because filial piety is a core value that must be enforced if social order is to be maintained. The person steps outside again into the courtyard, which is now clearly visible in the growing dawn light. The sky has transitioned from black to dark blue to a pale blue-gray, and the stars have completely faded except for perhaps one or two of the brightest that persist until the last possible moment. The eastern horizon is glowing golden orange, the sun not yet visible, but clearly approaching, its light reflecting off the underside of any clouds, painting them in spectacular colors, creating the daily miracle of dawn that the Aztecs understand not as an automatic natural process, but as a cosmic victory, the sun god completing his dangerous night journey through the underworld and emerging triumphant on the eastern horizon, ready to make his daily path across the sky before descending again into the west. And the nightly battle that will determine whether existence itself continues. The small garden that occupies much of the courtyard space is now fully visible. Several squash plants sprawl along one wall, their broad leaves catching the first direct sunlight that's beginning to penetrate the courtyard, their yellow flowers already opening to attract the bees and other pollinators that will ensure fruit development. Several clay pots contain chili pepper plants at various stages of development, some with green fruits that will eventually ripen to red or yellow, others already bearing mature peppers ready for harvest, adding spots of bright color to the otherwise green garden. A small plot of amaranth occupies another corner, its grain-bearing flowers providing both visual appeal and nutritious seeds that can be ground into flour or mixed with honey and shaped into figures for religious ceremonies. There are also various herbs, epizode for flavoring beans, and for treating digestive complaints, potly for its medicinal properties. Small patches of other plants, whose names and uses are known to the wife who maintains this garden, and who draws on generations of accumulated botanical knowledge to keep her family fed and healthy. This garden is both practical necessity and legal requirement. All commoner households in Tenochtitlan are expected to maintain a garden to supplement the food they receive from their Kalpali's communal agricultural lands, and from what they can purchase or trade for in the marketplace. The garden is inspected periodically by neighborhood officials who ensure compliance with this and other civic obligations. A household that neglects its garden might face fines or public shaming, or, in extreme cases, loss of property rights. The person tends this garden daily, a task that takes perhaps 15 or 20 minutes each morning, but that provides significant returns. Watering is accomplished using clay jars filled from the large storage jar, water poured carefully at the base of plants to avoid waste. Weeding is constant, pulling invasive plants before they can establish themselves and compete with desired species. Inspection for insects and disease is ongoing, catching problems early before they can spread and cause serious damage. Harvesting is done as things ripen, taking what's ready and allowing the rest to continue developing, maintaining a continuous supply rather than boom and bust cycles. The city is fully waking now, sounds increasing from all directions as thousands of households begin their day. Neighbors are emerging from their own homes, offering greetings to each other, commenting on the weather or sharing news, or simply acknowledging each other's presence in that casual way that neighbors do, maintaining the social fabric that makes urban life bearable. Somewhere not far away, perhaps 2 or 3 houses down the street, the distinctive sound of grinding begins, the rhythmic scraping of stone against stone, as women prepare maize for the day's tortillas. This sound is one of the defining features of Aztec mornings, heard in every household across the empire. The sound that marks the beginning of the day's food preparation. The tool used is the metate, a large flat or slightly concave stone platform, perhaps 2 feet long and a foot wide, set at an angle, and the mano, a cylindrical stone roller perhaps 8 inches long and 3 inches in diameter, held in both hands and pushed forward and pulled back across the metate's surface, crushing whatever is placed between the 2 stones. The person's wife is grinding maize now too, the sound coming from inside the house where she kneels before her metate in the cooking area. The maize she's grinding was prepared yesterday through the process of nixtamalization, a technique so important that without it, Mesoamerican civilization, as it exists, would be impossible. The maize kernels were soaked overnight in water mixed with cal-lime, calcium hydroxide produced by burning, and slaking limestone, which transforms the maize in several crucial ways. First, nixtamalization makes the hull of the kernel softer and easier to remove. Second, it significantly increases the bioavailability of niacin, vitamin B3, that's present in maize, but locked in a form humans can't digest unless it's been treated with alkali. Third, it improves the protein quality by changing the balance of amino acids. Fourth, it adds calcium to the diet, especially important in highland populations whose diet might otherwise be calcium deficient. Fifth, it improves flavor and aroma, creating that distinctive tortilla taste that's impossible to achieve with untreated maize. The Aztecs didn't know the biochemistry behind this process. They wouldn't discover vitamins and amino acids for another 400 years. But they learned through trial and error over generations that maize prepared this way kept people healthy, while maize prepared other ways did not. And that knowledge, embedded in daily practice and passed from mother to daughter for countless generations, allowed them to build a civilization based on maize cultivation. The grinding continues for perhaps half an hour, the wife working steadily, her upper body moving forward and back in a rhythm as ancient as agriculture itself. This is hard work, physically demanding, requiring upper body strength and endurance, and it's work that must be done every single day, because tortillas are best made from freshly ground masa, the dough starting to lose its ideal properties after just a few hours. A woman might spend 2 or 3 hours per day grinding maize, more in larger households, less in smaller ones. Time that's simultaneously productive labor and social opportunity, because women often grind together, visiting and gossiping and sharing news, while their hands perform the familiar motions. Gradually, through patient repetition, the nixtamalized maize breaks down from kernels to coarse particles to fine particles to a smooth dough masa that can be shaped and cooked. The wife tests the texture periodically, taking a pinch between her fingers, feeling its consistency, judging when it's reached the proper fineness. Too coarse and the tortillas will be rough and unpleasant to eat. Too long grinding and you're wasting energy without improving quality. Experience teaches the perfect moment to stop, and experienced women can achieve this consistency almost automatically, their hands knowing the right texture, even if they couldn't articulate the criteria in words. While the grinding continues, the person returns inside to begin organizing for the day ahead. The family's agricultural plot, a chinampa on the edge of the city, requires daily attention during growing season, and today is no exception. Tools must be gathered. A morning meal must be eaten. Children must be prepared for their own daily obligations. The rhythm of life in Tenochtitlan is structured and predictable, everyone knowing their responsibilities, everyone understanding how their individual efforts fit into the larger pattern of urban existence. The oldest son, Chimali, is now fully awake and preparing for school. He fetches clean clothing from the basket where such things are stored, washing his face and hands at the water jar in the courtyard, attempting to make himself presentable for the teachers who will instruct him today. Education is compulsory in the Aztec Empire, truly universal in a way that wouldn't be achieved in Europe for another 300 years. Every child, regardless of social class, regardless of gender, even including the children of slaves, must attend school from approximately age 6 until puberty, learning the basics of Aztec culture, history, religion, and proper behavior. For commoner children like Chimali, school is the temazcalli, the house of youth, a neighborhood institution that provides general education and military training. Noble children attend different schools, the Kamikak, where education is more rigorous and specialized, preparing them for leadership roles in government, military, or priesthood. But the basic principle that all children must be educated and shaped into proper citizens applies across all social classes. Evidence of the Aztec understanding that society depends on shared values and shared knowledge, that civilization requires the active formation of each new generation. The boy puts on his school clothing, clean and appropriate, understanding that appearance matters, that presenting oneself properly shows respect for teachers and learning and the community. His mother inspects him, adjusting his temazcalli to hang properly, using dampened fingers to smooth his hair, making sure he's acceptable. She says something to him, words of encouragement or reminder about proper behavior, or simply acknowledgement of his efforts, maintaining the parent-child connection even as he begins to move beyond the purely domestic sphere into the larger world. The family gathers now in the eating area for the morning meal, the first of 2 main meals that structure the Aztec day. The children sit on woven mats, waiting patiently with the disciplined behavior that's been drilled into them from earliest consciousness. Aztec child-rearing is notably strict by modern standards, with clear expectations and serious consequences for misbehavior. Children learn early to be quiet and respectful in the presence of adults, to wait patiently for food rather than demanding or whining, to perform assigned tasks without complaint, to accept discipline without argument. Modern child development experts might question some of these methods, but they produce children who are generally well-behaved, who understand their place in the social hierarchy, who contribute productively to household labor, who grow into adults capable of maintaining the complex social order that makes civilization possible. The wife brings the first tortillas, hot from the comal where she's been cooking them. The comal is a flat clay griddle, slightly concave, that sits over the fire supported by 3 stones that create space for flames and hot air to circulate underneath. The masa is shaped into balls, then flattened between the palms into thin discs, then placed on the hot komel where they cook quickly, puffing slightly as steam builds inside, developing the characteristic spots of browning that indicate proper cooking, releasing a smell that's instantly recognizable. And that triggers Pavlovian responses of hunger and anticipation. The tortillas are placed in a basket woven from reeds, lined with a cloth to keep them warm and soft. Then comes a clay bowl containing beans that were cooked yesterday in a pot that sat at the fire's edge for many hours, the beans slowly softening and absorbing water and the flavors of salt and chili that were added during cooking. The beans have been reheated this morning, stirred to ensure even temperature, checked for proper consistency, not too dry, not too soupy, but perfectly creamy and delicious. Another bowl contains nopal, the pads of the prickly pear cactus that grows wild throughout the highlands, and that's also cultivated in gardens. The nopal has been trimmed of its spines, sliced into strips, and cooked until tender, developing a slightly mucilaginous texture that some people love and others merely tolerate, but that everyone accepts because it's nutritious and filling and readily available. There's also a small bowl of salsa made from tomatoes and chilies ground together, adding spice and complexity to the otherwise simple meal, transforming plain tortillas and beans into something that actually tastes interesting and delicious. The family eats together, sitting in a loose circle on the floor, each person taking tortillas and using them to scoop up beans or nopal or dipping them in the salsa. This is the proper way to eat, using tortillas as both food and utensil, a technique so natural and efficient that it never occurs to anyone there might be other methods. The person eats steadily, methodically, enjoying the familiar flavors that have defined breakfast for as long as memory extends. The warmth of the food, the satisfaction of filling the stomach before the day's hard work begins. There's also something to drink. Adel, a warm beverage made from maize dough dissolved in water. This morning's adel is plain, just maize and water, though sometimes it's flavored with vanilla or chilies or cacao or honey, depending on what's available and what the occasion calls for. The adel is filling and warming, providing additional calories and liquid, soothing to drink in the cool morning air. The person drinks deeply from the clay cup, feeling the warmth spread through chest and belly, feeling energy building for the work ahead. As the family finishes eating, the first drum sounds from the Templo Mayor at the center of the city, a deep booming that carries across the entire island and beyond, audible for miles, marking the official beginning of the day. This is followed immediately by the sound of conch shell trumpets, their otherworldly wavering call adding to the drums, creating a soundscape that's both martial and sacred, beautiful and slightly terrifying, announcing that the sun has successfully completed its night journey through the underworld and has emerged victorious in the east, that another day of existence has been granted, that humans must now fulfill their obligations to maintain the cosmic order. The person rises, preparing to escort the oldest son to school before heading to the chinampas for the day's agricultural work. The boy is ready, his clothing clean and appropriate, his demeanor respectful and attentive, understanding that school is not optional recreation, but a serious obligation with serious consequences for failure to attend or perform adequately. Aztec education is demanding and sometimes harsh, with corporal punishment for misbehavior or poor performance. But it's also comprehensive and effective, producing citizens who understand their culture and their obligations, and who can function productively within the complex social system. The walk to the neighborhood school takes perhaps 10 minutes. The person and his son moving through streets that are now fully alive with morning activity. The streets themselves are remarkable, paved with stone in the main thoroughfares, packed earth in residential areas, but all of them swept clean every single morning by the cleaning crews that are one of Tenochtitlan's most distinctive features. Each Calpali neighborhood district employs about 1,000 men specifically for street cleaning and maintenance, sweeping away debris, picking up garbage, maintaining the cleanliness that makes Tenochtitlan the cleanest major city in the world at this time. Cleaner than Paris or London or Rome or Constantinople. Cleaner than anywhere else humans have yet managed to create urban density without overwhelming filth. The cleaning crews are already at work. Men with brooms made from bound reeds, sweeping methodically, collecting refuse into baskets that will be carried away and deposited in designated areas where it will either be burned or composted or used as fill material for expanding the island's edges. The Aztecs understand that urban density requires active waste management, that allowing garbage to accumulate creates disease and unpleasantness and social disorder, that maintaining cleanliness is part of maintaining civilization itself. Public toilets are positioned strategically throughout the city, simple structures built over canals, the waste dropping into boats positioned below. These boats then carrying the human waste to the chinampas, where it will be used as fertilizer, creating a closed-loop system that solves sanitation problems while providing valuable nutrients for agriculture. This system shocks the Spanish when they arrive, not because it's gross, but because it's so much more sophisticated than anything they have in Europe, where human waste is typically just thrown into the streets and left to accumulate until rain washes it away, creating conditions that breed disease and make European cities notorious for their stench. The neighborhood school, the temazcalli, is a substantial building, larger than the residential structures surrounding it, built of stone and mud brick with a thatched roof, occupying a prominent position in the Calpali. Several dozen children are already gathering, boys and girls both, ages ranging from perhaps 6 to 15, all dressed in clean, simple clothing appropriate to their commoner status. The teachers are already present, stern-faced men who take their responsibilities with utmost seriousness, who understand that they're not just teaching information, but shaping the next generation of Aztec citizens, instilling values and behaviors that will determine whether these children grow up to be productive members of society or disruptive troublemakers. The person leaves his son with a brief touch to the shoulder, a gesture of encouragement and connection, trusting that the boy will pay attention and learn well, and not bring shame to the family through poor behavior or performance. The boy joins the other children, finding his place in the rough hierarchy that children create everywhere, part of a group that will learn together, compete together, grow together through the years of education that will prepare them for adult responsibilities. The curriculum at the temazcalli is comprehensive and rigorous. Students learn history, the great stories of Aztec origins and migrations and conquests, understanding where their people came from and how they achieved their current dominance. They learn songs and poetry, memorizing vast amounts of material because Aztec knowledge transmission relies heavily on memorization and oral recitation rather than written records. And students must be able to perform these texts accurately during religious ceremonies and civic occasions. They learn proper behavior, the complex rules of etiquette and social interaction that govern Aztec society, understanding how to show respect to superiors, how to behave in temple precincts, how to conduct themselves in the marketplace and in other public spaces. They learn religion, the names and attributes of hundreds of gods and goddesses, the proper rituals and offerings for each deity, the calendar systems, both solar and ritual, the prophecies and myths that explain existence and predict the future. They learn agricultural techniques and craft skills, practical knowledge that will allow them to support themselves and contribute to their families and communities. And they learn military skills because all Aztec men are expected to serve as warriors when needed. And even commoner boys must learn to use weapons, to move in formation, to understand basic tactics and strategy. The person walks back through the busy streets toward home, noting the increasing activity as more people emerge from their houses and begin their daily activities. Merchants are opening market stalls, displaying goods for sale. Craftspeople are setting up workshops, preparing tools and materials for the day's production. Priests are visible moving toward temples for morning rituals. Government officials are heading to administrative buildings. The whole vast organism of the city is awakening, each person playing their assigned role, everyone contributing to the collective endeavor that makes urban civilization possible. Arriving home, the person gathers the tools needed for the day's work on the chinampa. A digging stick, basically a wooden pole sharpened at one end, hardened in fire, used for planting seeds and loosening soil. A woven basket made from reeds, useful for carrying harvested vegetables or for transporting materials. A gourd container for drinking water, essential because the work will be hot and sweaty despite the morning cool. An obsidian blade wrapped carefully in cloth for cutting stems and vines without damaging the plants. A coil of cordage made from maguey fiber, always useful for tying and securing and accomplishing the 100 small tasks that might arise during agricultural work. The wife is already deeply engaged in her own work for the day, sitting in the courtyard with her spinning equipment, beginning the long process of transforming raw cotton into thread that will eventually be woven into cloth. Spinning is one of the primary responsibilities of Aztec women, occupying huge amounts of time, and all women of all social classes spend hours each day at this task. The spinning is done using a spindle whorl, a wooden shaft with a clay disc near the bottom that provides weight and momentum. The fibers drawn from a mass of prepared cotton and twisted as the spindle rotates, creating thread of remarkable evenness and strength through skill developed over years of daily practice. The younger children are helping their mother in age-appropriate ways, learning through observation and gradually increasing participation, the skills they'll need as adults. The 7-year-old daughter is learning to prepare cotton fibers for spinning, separating and cleaning, and organizing the raw material. The 4-year-old is mostly just playing nearby, but even her play involves mimicking adult activities, pretending to spin or weave or cook, learning through imitation the behaviors and skills that will define her adult life. The person says goodbye to the family, reminding them he'll return in late afternoon, and sets out for the chinampa that provides much of the family's food and generates surplus for trade. The walk to the chinampas takes perhaps 30 minutes, moving from the residential interior of the island toward its agricultural periphery. The journey itself, a kind of transition from purely urban space to the hybrid environment, where city and agriculture merge into something unique to Tenochtitlan. The streets narrow as the person moves toward the edge of the island, the houses becoming slightly more spread out, the presence of gardens and small agricultural plots increasing. The canals become more prominent here, serving as primary transportation routes for moving produce from the chinampas to the central markets. The canals are busy with canoe traffic, farmers paddling toward the city with loads of vegetables and flowers, others returning empty to their plots to continue harvesting. The whole system humming with productive activity. Reaching the very edge of the island, the person stops for a moment to take in the view that never quite loses its power to amaze despite being seen every single day. Lake Texcoco stretches in all directions, its waters sparkling in the morning sun, vast and beautiful, and fundamentally different from the landlocked cities of most civilizations. And floating on these waters, extending as far as the eye can see in certain directions, are the chinampas, the famous floating gardens that are actually not floating at all, but are anchored to the lake bottom rectangular plots of incredibly fertile land that have been created by human ingenuity and labor, transforming a shallow lake into the most productive agricultural system in the ancient Americas. The chinampas are marvels of agricultural engineering, each one roughly 30 feet long and 10 feet wide, arranged in orderly grids separated by narrow canals that provide irrigation water and transportation routes. They were created by staking out the desired dimensions in the shallow parts of the lake, then piling up mud and vegetation and organic matter dredged from the lake bottom, building up the layers until the plot rises above the water level, then anchoring the whole structure by planting willow trees along the edges, their roots growing down through the built-up material to anchor into the lake bed below, creating permanent, stable islands that won't wash away or drift. The fertility of chinampas is legendary, and for good reason. The constant proximity to water means irrigation is never a problem. Plants can draw moisture from below through capillary action, and additional water can be easily applied from the surrounding canals. The organic-rich mud, periodically dredged up and spread on the surface, provides continuous fertilization. The mild climate at this altitude and latitude allows year-round cultivation with no dormant season. Multiple crops can be grown per year, sometimes 3 or even 4 harvests of certain vegetables. Productivity levels that wouldn't be matched until modern intensive agriculture with its chemical fertilizers and mechanization. The person's chinampa is located perhaps 100 yards from shore, accessible by a narrow causeway made of packed earth and stones, just wide enough for a person to walk on. The person moves carefully along this causeway, mindful of the water on both sides, arriving at the family's plot that represents both inheritance from previous generations and investment for future ones. This particular chinampa has been in the family for 3 generations, passed down from grandfather to father to the person we're following, and will presumably pass to the oldest son, Chimeli, when the current generation dies, continuing the unbroken chain of cultivation and care. The chinampa is lush with growing plants, nearly every inch of surface devoted to productive crops. Several varieties of squash are sprawling across significant portions, their broad leaves creating almost complete ground cover, their yellow flowers open to morning pollinators, their fruits developing at various stages from tiny embryonic squashes to full-grown mature ones ready for harvest. Tomato plants are staked upright, their vines climbing supports made from dried maize stalks, their fruits ripening from green to red, providing both food and valuable trade goods, because fresh tomatoes command good prices in the market. Beans are growing here too, both as independent plants and interplanted with the squash in the traditional 3 sisters pattern that the Aztecs inherited from earlier Mesoamerican civilizations. The beans climb the squash stems, their roots harboring nitrogen-fixing bacteria that enrich the soil, creating a symbiotic relationship between crops that increases overall productivity. Chili peppers occupy several raised beds, multiple varieties providing different levels of heat and different flavors, from mild sweet peppers to intensely spicy ones that can make unwary eaters cry. All valuable both for household use and for sale. There are also flowers, mostly marigolds, their bright orange and yellow blossoms adding color to the predominant green of vegetables. The flowers aren't just decorative, they have multiple uses. Marigold petals are used in religious ceremonies, scattered on altars and temple steps, offered to gods and to the dead. They're used medicinally for various ailments. They're eaten in certain dishes, and they attract beneficial insects while repelling harmful ones, providing natural pest control. Growing flowers alongside food crops is standard Aztec practice. Another example of the sophisticated agricultural knowledge embedded in daily practice. The person begins the morning's work with inspection, walking slowly around the chinampas perimeter, checking for any problems that might have developed overnight or that were missed yesterday. Are there signs of pest damage? Are plants wilting from insufficient water or disease? Are weeds gaining a foothold? Is there erosion along the edges where the willow tree's roots hold the chinampa together? Most days the inspection reveals nothing alarming, just the normal ongoing maintenance that agriculture always requires. But occasionally, there are surprises that need immediate attention. Today, everything looks good, healthy, productive. The person proceeds to watering, though this is less crucial on a chinampa than it would be in regular field agriculture. The plants can draw moisture from below, sucking water up through the soil from the lake just inches beneath them. But some crops benefit from additional water applied from above, especially seedlings and shallow-rooted plants. So the person uses a clay jar to scoop water from the canal and pours it carefully at the base of selected plants, targeting those that look like they need it most. Next comes weeding, the eternal task that's never truly finished because weeds are persistent and opportunistic, appearing wherever there's disturbed soil and available nutrients. The person moves methodically through the chinampa, pulling invasive plants by hand or digging them out with the pointed stick, tossing the weeds into the canal where they'll decompose and contribute to the general fertility of the system. Some weeds are actually useful. Certain varieties are edible or medicinal, and these are set aside for later use rather than being discarded. The work is meditative, repetitive, allowing the mind to wander while the hands perform their familiar tasks. The person thinks about family, about the oldest son's progress in school, and whether he shows signs of exceptional ability that might allow him to rise beyond his father's status. Thinks about the wife and her health and the new pregnancy that seems to be developing, though it's too early to be certain. Thinks about the grandmother who's been feeling weaker lately, whose time might be approaching, whose eventual death will be painful, but but also expected and accepted as part of the natural cycle that governs all existence. Thinks about the harvest that will come in the next few weeks, trying to estimate yields, trying to calculate whether there will be enough surplus to trade for some of the goods the family needs. New grinding stones, because the metate is wearing thin, more cotton fiber for spinning, because the wife is nearly out of her current supply. Perhaps some cacao beans, if the harvest is particularly good. A luxury treat that the family enjoys only occasionally, mixing the ground cacao with water and chili to create the bitter chocolate drink that's popular across all social classes, though the wealthy can afford to drink it more frequently, and with additional flavorings like vanilla and honey. Thinks about the empire and the rumors that occasionally filter down to commoner level. Stories about trouble on the eastern coast, about strange, pale-skinned, bearded men arriving in boats larger than anyone has seen before, about weapons that shoot lightning and thunder, about animals large enough to ride that run faster than men can sprint. These stories seem too strange to be real, like myths or exaggerations or outright lies, and the person doesn't give them much credence. The empire has always existed and always will exist. The gods are satisfied with the sacrifices they're receiving. The universe is stable and ordered. Life continues, as it always has and always will. Of course, we know what the person doesn't, that these rumors are actually true, that Spanish conquistadors under Hernan Cortés are already on the mainland, that within months they'll arrive in Tenochtitlan and be welcomed initially as guests before tensions explode into warfare, that within 2 years the city will be destroyed and the empire will be gone, and this entire way of life will be shattered beyond repair. But in this moment, in this morning of ordinary work on a chinampa, none of that is knowable or even imaginable. The sun climbs higher, the day grows warmer, and the person continues working steadily. Around midday, the person pauses for a brief rest and meal, sitting on the edge of the chinampa, with feet dangling into the cool water, opening the cloth bundle that contains the simple lunch brought from home. More tortillas, cold now, but still good, some leftover beans, a tomato picked fresh just moments ago from the plants right here, bursting with flavor that store-bought tomatoes in modern times can rarely match. Drinking water is scooped directly from the canal, which is reasonably clean here away from the densest urban areas, cool and refreshing. After eating, the person lies back for a few minutes, looking up at the sky where white clouds are building, perhaps bringing rain later, though it's hard to say. Rain would be welcome for the crops, a sign of Tlaloc's favor, though too much rain can sometimes cause problems, flooding low-lying areas or damaging delicate flowers. The sound of water lapping against the chinampa's edges is soothing, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The person could easily fall asleep here, as has happened occasionally. Brief afternoon naps that refresh and restore energy. But today, there's too much work remaining, too much that needs to be accomplished before evening. The afternoon work involves harvesting, selecting vegetables that have reached optimal maturity. Several squash are cut from their vines using the obsidian blade, its edge sharper than steel though more brittle, requiring careful use to avoid chipping. The squash are large and heavy and perfect, their skins unblemished, their size and quality testament to the fertility of the chinampa system and the skill of the farmer tending them. These will go to market tomorrow, commanding good prices, generating income that will support the family's needs. Tomatoes are picked too, selecting those that are fully ripe while leaving greener ones to mature over the next few days, maintaining a continuous supply rather than harvesting everything at once. Some chili peppers are gathered, a mix of varieties, some for household use and some for sale. The harvested vegetables are placed carefully in the woven basket, creating a colorful abundance that represents both immediate food security and potential trade value, both subsistence and surplus, both necessity and opportunity. As the afternoon wanes and the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, where it will enter the underworld and begin its dangerous night journey, the person prepares to return to the city. The tools are cleaned of dirt and mud, checked for damage, stored in a small thatched shelter on the chinampa that protects them from weather and theft. The basket of harvested vegetables is hefted onto the shoulder, its weight satisfying, evidence of a productive day, justification for the hours of labor invested. The walk back through the city takes on a different character in late afternoon. The heat of midday is fading. People are beginning to think about evening meals and rest. Children are returning from school, the whole city shifting from daytime production mode toward evening family and social time. The canals are still busy, but with different traffic patterns. Less movement from periphery to center, more circulation within neighborhoods as people conclude their day's activities and return to their homes. The person stops at a neighborhood well to refill the water container, then fills a large clay jar that will be carried home for cooking and washing. Water management is a daily task for every household, requiring someone to make this trip to the communal fountain or well, to carry heavy containers back home, to monitor the supply and ensure it doesn't run out. The aqueduct system that brings fresh water from mainland springs to the island is one of Tenochtitlan's engineering triumphs, allowing dense urban population in the middle of a lake. But individual households must still collect and transport their own supply from distribution points. Arriving home in early evening, the person is greeted by the family. The wife and daughters emerge from the house where they've been working all afternoon at spinning and other household tasks. The grandmother comes out from the courtyard where she's been supervising the youngest child and tending the garden. Everyone gathers to see what vegetables were harvested, to admire the size and quality, to discuss what should be kept for family use and what should be taken to market tomorrow, to participate in the collective evaluation of the day's agricultural success. The oldest son, Chimeli, returns from school, still in his clean school clothing, but looking slightly rumpled and tired from the long day of intensive learning. He reports what he studied today: songs about the reign of the previous emperor, military formations, and basic weapon handling. Proper techniques for bloodletting self-sacrifice that he'll be expected to perform during religious ceremonies. The person listens and asks questions and offers encouragement, proud that his son is receiving the education that will make him a proper Aztec citizen, that will give him opportunities that weren't available to previous generations. But before the evening meal, before the family gathers and relaxes, there's one important ritual that must be performed: the steam bath, the temazcalli. This is not a luxury or an occasional indulgence, but a necessity, a regular practice that all proper Aztec citizens engage in, a cleansing that's simultaneously physical and spiritual, removing not just dirt and sweat, but also negative energies and spiritual pollution that accumulate through daily living in the material world. The family's temazcalli is a small separate structure attached to the main house, built specifically for this purpose. It's dome-shaped, made of mud brick, with thick walls that retain heat, a low entrance that requires crawling to enter, and a small opening in the ceiling for ventilation. A fire has been burning for several hours outside the temazcalli, heating volcanic stones until they're almost glowing, radiating intense heat. These hot stones have been moved inside the structure using wooden poles arranged in a central pit. The person enters the temazcalli along with Chimeli, the father-son bathing time serving as bonding and teaching opportunity. They're nearly naked, wearing only minimal covering out of modesty, settling onto low benches built into the structure's interior. The air is already hot and dry from the heated stones, making breathing initially difficult until the lungs adjust. The person pours water from a gourd onto the hot stones, and immediately steam billows up, filling the small space, raising the temperature and humidity to levels that would be unbearable if you weren't expecting them, and prepared for them through lifelong familiarity. More water is poured periodically, maintaining the steam, creating an environment that causes intense sweating. The sweat pours from every pore, running down faces and bodies, carrying away toxins and dirt, cleansing the body more thoroughly than simple washing with water ever could. The heat penetrates deep into muscles, easing aches and tensions, relaxing bodies that have been working hard all day, providing therapeutic benefit that's both immediate and cumulative. Part of why the Aztecs experience fewer joint problems and muscle pain than European populations who don't have this regular heat treatment. The temazcalli session lasts perhaps 20 or 30 minutes, as long as can be comfortably endured. Then the participants emerge into the cool evening air, the temperature contrast shocking and invigorating, and douse themselves with cool water, rinsing away the sweat and completing the cleansing cycle. The feeling afterward is extraordinary, clean and light and renewed, as if the body has been reset, restored to proper functioning, purified and prepared for the evening and night ahead. The person and son dress in fresh, clean clothing, feeling the pleasant sensation of clean fabric against clean skin. The wife and daughters will take their own steam bath next. The temazcalli, a family resource used in shifts. Everyone getting the benefit, but not all at once, because the structure is small and works best with just a few people at a time. As darkness falls and the family gathers for the evening meal, the second and final major eating time of the day, the wife has prepared a more substantial and elaborate feast than the simple breakfast. Tonight, there's turkey meat, one of the few animals the Aztecs raised domestically, cooked in a complex sauce made from ground pumpkin seeds and chilies, creating flavors that are simultaneously rich and spicy and slightly sweet, showcasing the sophisticated cuisine that Aztec cooks have developed over centuries. There are fresh tortillas, of course, still warm from the comal, and beans, and a salad made from young amaranth greens dressed with salt and lime juice, and the squash and tomatoes from today's harvest, prepared in various ways to showcase their flavors. There's also adult to drink, this evening's version flavored with honey and vanilla, special because today was productive and successful and deserves celebration, sweet and warming and delicious. The family eats together in the traditional manner, sitting in a circle on woven mats, using tortillas to scoop food, eating with hands, talking and laughing, and sharing the day's experiences. The children tell of their activities, the oldest reporting more about school, the middle daughter showing the progress she's made in learning to spin thread, the youngest babbling about whatever catches a 4-year-old's attention, everyone participating in the collective sharing that makes a family more than just individuals who happen to live together. The grandmother tells stories, ancient tales that have been passed down through countless generations, stories that will continue into the future. Tonight, it's the story of the 5 sons, the 5 ages of the world, 4 of which have already ended in catastrophe, and the 5th of which, the current age, will eventually end too, unless humans maintain cosmic order through proper behavior and sacrifice. The children listen with wide eyes, simultaneously frightened and fascinated by tales of worlds ending in fire or flood or being devoured by jaguars. Understanding that existence is fragile and temporary, and that only constant vigilance prevents disaster. These stories aren't just entertainment, but education, philosophy, religion, history, and moral instruction, all woven together into narratives that carry the accumulated wisdom of the culture and transmit it without need for books or formal schooling. The children are learning how the world works, what dangers threaten, what humans must do to maintain safety and prosperity, all embedded in memorable stories that will stay with them throughout their lives, and that they'll eventually tell to their own children and grandchildren, keeping the knowledge alive across generations. As the evening progresses and the children begin to yawn, showing signs of tiredness, preparations are made for sleep. The sleeping mats are unrolled and spread in their customary positions. Blankets are distributed. The fire is banked carefully to leave enough coals for easy rekindling in the morning, but not so much that it will burn uncontrolled through the night. The person performs one final visit to the courtyard shrine, offering brief prayers of thanks for the day's blessings and petitions for protection through the vulnerable hours of darkness. When evil forces are strongest and most dangerous, lying down on the woven reed mat that serves as bed, pulling the cotton blanket close against the night's cool air, feeling the comforting presence of family members nearby, the person reflects on the day that's ending. It was a good day, ordinary, but satisfying, productive, but not exhausting. Another successful turn in the endless cycle of work and rest and family and community that structures Aztec life. Tomorrow will bring similar tasks and challenges. The vegetables must be taken to market. The chinampa requires continued attention. Children must be fed and clothed and supervised. Household work continues without end. The gods must be honored and appeased. But those concerns are for tomorrow. Tonight, consciousness is fading, sleep approaching like the darkness that has already fallen over the city, over the lake, over the entire valley of Mexico. The last thought might be gratitude for family, for food, for health, for the blessing of living in the greatest city in the world at the height of the empire's power. In this moment that seems eternal, when no one can imagine that everything is about to change forever. And now, dear traveler, let us step back from this intimate domestic scene and consider the larger context of what we've witnessed. Let us rise above this one family and see the city spread beneath us, Tenochtitlan in all its impossible glory, a metropolis of perhaps 200,000 people built on an island in the middle of a lake, connected to the mainland by massive causeways, supplied with fresh water by monumental aqueducts, sustained by the floating gardens that surround it like a green embrace. This is one of the largest and most sophisticated cities in the world in 1519, larger than Paris, larger than London, comparable to Istanbul or Cairo. But it exists in a part of the world that Europeans don't even know about. That exists entirely outside their mental map of reality. When Spanish conquistadors first see it, they literally cannot believe their eyes, cannot process what they're witnessing. Some later writing that they thought they were dreaming or enchanted, that the city seemed like something from a romance novel rather than reality. The person whose day we followed is just one of 200,000 inhabitants, one thread in an enormous tapestry of human activity and organization. But that person's life, ordinary as it appears, is part of what makes the entire system function. part of the foundation on which the temples and palaces and ceremonies rest. Without farmers producing surplus food, without craftspeople creating goods, without merchants facilitating exchange, without parents raising children in the proper ways, without every commoner fulfilling their obligations and performing their assigned roles, the whole elaborate structure would collapse into chaos. And it will collapse terribly soon, destroyed by a combination of military conquest, epidemic disease, and the systematic dismantling of the systems that made it work. The Spanish will arrive within months, bringing horses and guns and diseases against which the Aztecs have no immunity. The empire will fall within 2 years. Tenochtitlan will be destroyed, literally razed to the ground, and Mexico City will be built on its ruins. The population will crash by perhaps 90% due to smallpox and measles and other old world diseases. The culture will be suppressed, the religion banned, the language marginalized, the entire worldview labeled as paganism and superstition, and actively eradicated by missionary zealots, convinced they're saving souls by destroying indigenous culture. But in this moment, in this evening of 1519, none of that is knowable. The family sleeps peacefully, the city rests, the empire continues in its ancient patterns, and everything seems eternal and unchanging, as if this moment could last forever, as if nothing will ever disturb the cycles that have governed life for generations. As you drift toward your own sleep now, carry with you the images and sounds and smells of this remarkable civilization. Carry the memory of tortillas being ground on stone metate, of copal incense rising from 1,000 shrines, of canoes gliding through canals, of children learning ancient songs in neighborhood schools, of families gathering for meals and stories, of steam baths cleansing body and spirit, of chinampas producing impossible abundance from lake and mud and human ingenuity. Carry the understanding that human beings have created countless different ways of organizing society and making meaning and solving the problems of existence. The Aztecs weren't primitive or inferior to Europeans despite lacking certain technologies like the wheel for transportation, or draft animals, or iron metallurgy. In many ways, urban planning, hygiene, universal education, agricultural productivity, organization, and administration, they actually surpassed contemporary European civilizations. Yes, they practiced human sacrifice, which horrifies modern sensibilities, and which horrified the Spanish who encountered it. But they did so within a coherent religious and philosophical framework, genuinely believing that the universe required it, that the sun would die without it, that they were performing a sacred duty to maintain existence itself. We don't have to approve to understand that every civilization makes moral decisions based on its worldview, that practices that seem obviously wrong to us made perfect sense within different frameworks, that judging the past by present standards is both inevitable and unfair. Sleep now, modern person. In your world, so vastly different from Aztec Tenochtitlan. Sleep knowing that 500 years ago, people lived complex, meaningful lives in ways utterly unlike yours, that they loved and feared and hoped and created, that they were fully human even though their humanity expressed itself in profoundly different forms. Sleep knowing that cultural diversity is one of our species' great achievements, that humans have invented thousands of different ways of being human, that every civilization is an experiment in solving the eternal problems of existence, meaning, purpose, and death. Dream of pyramids rising from lakes, of floating gardens producing abundance, of markets filled with goods from across an empire, of children learning in universal schools, of families gathering around fires, of cities cleaner than any others in the world, of a civilization at its peak moments before catastrophic change. Dream of Tenochtitlan, impossible and real, magnificent and terrible, sophisticated and shocking. A human achievement worthy of remembrance and respect, even as we acknowledge the practices within it that we cannot condone. The family sleeps, the city sleeps. 500 years flow between then and now like water through canals, carrying everything away, yet somehow preserving fragments, memories, the descendants who still live in Mexico, the foods that are still eaten, the language that's still spoken, the culture that persists despite conquest and colonization and centuries of suppression. The Aztecs are gone, but not entirely, transformed, but not erased, their legacy visible in countless aspects of modern Mexican life and consciousness. Rest now, sleep deeply, and wake knowing that the human story is vast and strange and full of wonders we can barely imagine, that we're part of something much larger than ourselves, that the past connects to the present, connects to the future, in chains unbroken despite all disruptions, that being human means participating in this great ongoing experiment in consciousness and culture, and the search for meaning in a universe that offers no guarantees. Good night, traveler. Good night, visitor to vanished worlds. Sleep and dream and wake refreshed, carrying with you a small piece of Tenochtitlan, a connection to those long-dead people whose civilization was destroyed, but whose humanity persists in memory, and in the millions who carry their blood and their stories forward into whatever futures await.